I wasn't supposed to be there that morning. That's the thing about life, the moments that change everything. They don't announce themselves. They don't send you a letter. They don't give you time to prepare. They just happen, and you're standing there in the middle of it, wondering how you ended up in exactly that spot at exactly that second. It was a Tuesday, early October. One of those London mornings where the sky can't decide what it wants to be, gray one moment, almost golden the next, then gray again. The kind of morning that smells like damp stone and old leaves and something else underneath, something you can't quite name. I'd come to London for a work conference. Boring stuff, financial audits, the kind of thing that makes your eyes go flat just thinking about it. But I'd woken up an hour early, couldn't sleep, and I thought, why not walk? Why not see something real before a day of spreadsheets? So I walked to the palace. I don't know why. Tourists do it. I'd never done it before, even though I've passed through London maybe 6, 7 times over the years. There's always a reason not to. Too busy, too tired, too sensible. But that morning something pulled me down the mall, past the trees just starting to turn, past the early joggers and the pigeons who own the pavement like it was written into law. I got to the main gate around 6:30. The light was still thin and pale. A small handful of tourists were already there, clustered near the iron railings, phones up. A Japanese couple. A family American from the accent with 2 kids who were already bored and saying so loudly. A young woman on her own with a film camera, the old kind, the kind that clicks. She was patient. She knew how to wait for something. The guards were at their posts. You know how they stand, rigid, ceremonial, like they've been placed there rather than walked there. The red tunics, the tall black bearskin hats, the absolute refusal to acknowledge the world happening around them. I always thought it was a performance. I thought it was theater for tourists, for the cameras, for the image. I didn't think there was a real person inside all that stillness. That morning changed my mind. There were 2 guards visible at the main gate. The one on the left I barely registered. He was doing what guards do, which is nothing, magnificently. But the one on the right caught my eye almost immediately, and I couldn't tell you exactly why. He was the same as the other in uniform, same posture, same held jaw. But there was something around his eyes, a tension, something coiled behind the stillness that the other guard didn't have. I noticed it the way you notice a painting slightly crooked on a wall. Something's off, but you can't explain the off. I stood back a bit from the main cluster of tourists. I had my coffee from a paper cup I'd picked up on the way. I was just watching, half awake, not expecting anything. Then a car arrived. Not the usual kind of vehicle that drifts past that area. Not a tour bus, not a black cab. A dark, official-looking saloon. No markings you'd notice, but something about it, the speed it moved at, the way the gates were already being opened before it fully stopped, told you this wasn't an ordinary arrival. The tourists shifted. Phones went up higher. The bored American kids went quiet. The car pulled through and stopped just inside the gate. A door opened, and I recognized the woman who stepped out. Now I want to be careful here about what I say and how I say it, because what I'm about to describe, I've turned it over in my head more times than I can count since it happened. I've asked myself whether I saw what I thought I saw, whether the light was playing tricks, whether I was still half asleep and filling in gaps with imagination. But I don't think I was. She stepped out of the car and she looked not right. That's the only honest way I can put it. Not ill, not frightened, not angry, just not right. Like someone who has been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and has almost reached the point where they can't carry it anymore. She was dressed neatly, put together the way those people always are, even at that hour. She spoke briefly to the aide beside her, glanced toward the palace entrance, and then, this is the part that stays with me, she stopped. She turned toward the gate, toward the guard on the right. He had seen her already, of course he had. His eyes track everything even when his body refuses to move. But when she turned toward him, something shifted in his posture, barely. A millimeter of something. If you weren't watching him the way I was watching him, you'd miss it entirely. She took 2 steps toward him. The aide put a hand up, not grabbing, just a gentle stop gesture. She shook her head slightly and kept walking. She stopped about 4 feet from him. And she spoke. I couldn't hear the words. I was outside the gate, 20 feet back at least. The American family was talking again, the kids, something about being hungry, and the city had its usual low hum underneath everything. But I could see her speaking. I could see the movement of it, the effort of it, like the words cost something. The guard did not move. He did not respond, did not blink differently, did not adjust his hands. He was stone, protocol, ceremony. But then she said something else. One sentence, maybe two, and I watched his jaw change. Not dramatically, not like in films where the revelation hits and the face collapses. Just a tightening, a fractional shift in the muscles below his ear. The kind of change that a face makes when it is absorbing something it was not prepared for. She was still speaking, low now, urgent, and she lifted her chin slightly, and I caught her face full on for just a moment, and she genuinely looked like she was pleading. Not performing, not managing, pleading. What happened next, I need to describe exactly as I saw it, without layering meaning on top that wasn't mine to add. The guard reached into the interior of his tunic, which is not something they do. That is not part of the ceremony. That is not part of anything a guard at that position, in that moment, would ever do in front of a crowd, in front of cameras, in front of the world. Every tourist at that gate noticed. Even the kids went silent. The woman with the film camera, I heard the click. He produced a small envelope, white, standard, the kind you'd buy in any post office, and he held it out. She didn't take it immediately. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she looked at him. Something passed between them, not words, not gesture, just the kind of held gaze that happens when two people know exactly what they're doing and exactly what it means. She took the envelope. She turned it over in her hands once. And then she said something, one word, I think, maybe two, and her face did something I wasn't prepared for. It crumpled. Not weeping, not breaking down. Just that specific, terrible thing a face does in the split second before a person decides whether to let themselves feel something or lock it back up. She locked it back up. She squared her shoulders, tucked the envelope into the fold of her coat, said something brief to the aide that made him nod quickly, and walked toward the palace entrance without looking back. The guard returned to stillness. Like none of it had happened. I stood there for probably 2 full minutes without moving. The American father said, "Was that?" to his wife, and she shushed him with a look. The Japanese couple were scrolling through whatever they'd filmed, leaning together, murmuring. The young woman with the film camera lowered it and looked at me. She'd caught me watching, caught me standing apart from the rest, and she gave me a look that I can only describe as I saw it too. Then she walked away. Here's what I've thought about since. Here's what I've turned over and over in the quiet of late nights. I don't know what was in that envelope. I don't know what she said to him in those first seconds. I don't know what he said, if he said anything at all. I don't know what history existed between a royal guard standing at his post and a woman who arrived in an official car before the city was fully awake. But I know what a DNA revelation looks like when it lands in someone's body. I've seen it before, not at a palace gate, obviously, but in a doctor's office once, years ago, sitting with my mother when test results came back about her family history. I watched her face do that exact thing, that absorb, process, lock, and I know the shape of it. I know what it looks like when information arrives that reorganizes everything you thought you knew about who you are and where you came from. That's what I saw. Whether it confirmed something she already feared, whether it answered a question she'd been living alongside for years without daring to ask out loud. Whether it was relief or devastation or some impossible mixture of both, I can't tell you. But something in that envelope knew something about her. And the guard had been holding it. I've asked myself 100 times why he was the one holding it. Why not a solicitor? Why not a private secretary, a family member, someone in the long chain of official people whose job it is to manage these things at that level? Maybe because sometimes the only person you can trust with a thing like that is someone whose job it is to stand still and say nothing. Someone who has spent years perfecting the discipline of presence without intrusion. Someone who sees everything and is required, by oath and by duty, to carry none of it out through the gate. Guards hear things. Guards see things. Their furniture, as far as most people are concerned, beautiful ceremonial furniture. And furniture doesn't talk. Maybe someone decided that was the safest kind of custody. Or maybe it was something older than strategy. Maybe it was something personal. Maybe this particular guard had a reason to be the one holding it that had nothing to do with duty and everything to do with something I couldn't see and wasn't meant to see. I don't know. I've learned, as I've gotten older, that I don't know is often the most honest sentence a person can speak. And sitting with I don't know, not trying to fill it in, not inventing a story to cover the gap, is harder than it sounds. I went to my conference. I sat through 5 hours of financial presentations. I ate a sandwich at lunch that tasted like nothing. I answered emails. I did everything a person does when their ordinary life continues around an extraordinary thing they've witnessed. But at dinner, sitting alone at a small Italian place near my hotel, I ordered a glass of wine I didn't really want, and I just sat with it. That look on her face, the way her shoulders squared before she walked away, the particular discipline of someone who has been taught, or has taught themselves, that the world is always watching and that the world must never see the real thing, must never see the weight, must only see the composure. What does it cost? I kept thinking. What does it cost to carry something enormous in a body that must always look like it's carrying nothing? I never found out more. I looked. Of course I looked. In the days after I searched, I read, I followed the usual churn of news about the royals the way you do when you're looking for a thread to pull. I found nothing that matched what I'd seen. Nothing about DNA. Nothing about a revelation. Nothing about an early morning arrival or an unexpected exchange at a gate. Which means either nothing was ever made public, or I saw something that was designed, from the very beginning, not to be seen. There's a particular quality to the moments in life that don't resolve. Most stories, you tell them because they have endings, because they close, because the shape of the thing is complete and you can hand it to someone and they can hold it. This one doesn't close. I stood outside those gates on an ordinary Tuesday morning with a paper cup of cooling coffee, and I watched something that I don't have the authority or the information to name. I watched a woman receive something she had been waiting for, maybe dreading, maybe hoping for, maybe both at once. I watched a man who was trained to feel nothing feel something briefly before the training one. And then the city carried on. The tourists drifted. A bus exhaled past. Somewhere behind the palace walls, footsteps on polished floors, corridors, decisions, the long machinery of an institution grinding forward as it always has, as it seems it always will. The guard went back to being stone. And whatever was in that envelope, whatever truth about blood and origin and identity had been folded into that ordinary white paper, it went with her through a door that I would never walk through. Some secrets don't need to be broken open to be devastating. Sometimes they just need to be known, quietly, privately, in a space between two people at an iron gate on a pale Tuesday morning. And that knowing is enough to change the shape of everything. I walked back to my hotel. I didn't tell anyone what I'd seen. Not because I was afraid, and not because I doubted myself, but because some things belong to the moment they happened in. And because, for just a few seconds, before she squared her shoulders and became what she always has to be, I watched someone hold the truth of herself in her hands. And I thought that deserved, at the very least, the dignity of silence.